Greetings. Greetings. Tony Mobley here, and welcome to Conversations with Tony Mobley. Today is the second Conversation with Tony Mobley to be simulcast with YouTube and LinkedIn Live. We would also like to welcome our radio listeners in Cincinnati, Ohio on Z98. And you can hear us on the radio by going to Z98FM.com. On Conversations with Tony Mobley today, I am having a conversation with my friend, Aaron Huslage. Thank you, sir, for being here with me today. Looking forward to our conversation.
Happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you, sir. This is episode 68 of Conversations with Tony Mobley. Thanks to everyone for being a part of the journey. Watch live on YouTube, my website, conversationwithTonyMobley.com. Conversation with Tony Mobley is produced by valued audio/video professionals that meet every day on officehours.global and hosted by Alex Lindsay. Conversations with real people. Last week, we had a conversation with Mr. Eric Nathan, and I would like to thank the team again behind Conversation with Tony Mobley. I need your help. Please go to conversationswithTonyMobley.com, register for our interactive chat, which is called Mukana, courtesy of Alex Lindsay and 090. And there you can ask questions, and those questions can be voted up and down. Again, go to conversationwithTonyMobley.com, and we are going to get into this conversation with Mr. Aaron Huslage. Thank you, Aaron, for being with me again. And so the very first question is, who is Aaron Huslage?
Aaron Huslage is a geek, a father, a human who is really interested in other humans and making the world a better place. And I like to play with video toys and computer software and hardware. And yeah, that's me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And we will explore even more about who Aaron Huslage is in this conversation. The second question is, what lessons have you learned from your parents that you're currently using today?
That's a good question. I've been kind of mulling over here while I've been waiting for the show to start. My parents were both involved in theater really heavily when I was growing up, community theater in Midland, Texas. And what that taught me, and I think what they wanted to teach me from that, is to value everyone and to respect everyone's dignity and humanity, no matter what box society wants to put them in, or that they want to put in themselves, put box they want to put themselves in. You know, they're human beings and they deserve our respect and our love. And yeah, I mean, I think that's really a core value that I live by every day. So that's kind of what my parents, the way they brought me up.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And we all love Miss Nancy. So
yes, of course.
Tell her I said hello.
I will.
I hope she's watching.
To being back on.
Good. I'm looking forward to having her back on. Can you share some of your work in nonprofit?
Well, so right now I work for a nonprofit called Meedan, and we build tools for journalists who are doing fact checking all over the world. So we're a global organization, and I work on computer systems and security for them. You know, my kind of core work, I guess, throughout my career is helping people communicate more effectively all over the place. And, you know, I think we've got to sort of problem right now, especially right now with the amount of information that we receive off the internet and everywhere really, and how we perceive that information and how easily we're manipulated by that information and potentially manipulated by that information. And so that's where my work has led me now, is to work on this sort of big topic in my own little way, with enabling journalists who are really good at their jobs, really understand the facts that they work with, to make, meaningful contributions to, our knowledge and to our ability to perceive the world in the right way, in a realistic way, so to speak. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and that sounds like we should have another conversation with Tony Mobley and Aaron Huslage about that work, because
Sure.
It sounds extremely important. And wow, based on what we're dealing with right now, I think that would absolutely be a great conversation for us to have.
Happy to do it.
So thank you for sharing that. The next question is, let's talk about your career in technology. So you want to share some things that you did before the nonprofit, or how did you get into working in the technology arena?
So I'm a Generation X guy, so I was born in the 70s, and my first computer was a Commodore 64 hooked up to a little black and white TV, and that was kind of it for me. I used to take things apart all the time when I was a kid, and technology has always been fascinating to me, and I learned how to program that computer and how to, I learned about playing games and doing, all sorts of things. I made a little application when I was a kid to do like restaurant tabulation and stuff just for fun, because I was nerdy. And and so tech has always been a part of my life. And in high school, I got really into television production and stage production, tech as well. So lighting, sound, but also the production side of television production, doing graphics for, a bunch of different places, and doing camera work and things like that. So, and then I worked at a radio station for a while, and then and a local television station in Raleigh called I can't speak anymore. WRAL, and WRAL is a very kind of forward-looking company. And one day I've been on the internet since 1989, I guess. And so I introduced the person that gave me internet access to the owner of Capital Broadcasting, the company that owns the TV station. And eventually he ended up buying the customer base and starting an internet provider in 93, I guess. And so he asked me to work there. And so I worked there and sort of left broadcasting and started doing internet things when the internet was still, kind of this magical place, I guess. And so, yeah, that's what really, and I started making websites, and I started, this was all in really early web days, but started doing all of that. We did the first live stream of a regular radio show that was on every day called some golfing channel thing. I don't remember what it was called, but it was an audio live stream, and we did all sorts of really neat things back then. And so it's been, that's been my life. I've worked for, I'm not gonna give you my whole resume, but I've worked for big companies and tiny companies, from like Microsoft and to little startup companies doing maps on the internet, to doing, working for the Major League Baseball, all these places.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really amazing, Aaron. Thank you for sharing that. And I wanted you to go ahead and take a few minutes and get you some water. And while Aaron is getting some water, I want to say to those who might be listening, this is a great time to come and ask questions in Mukana, or you can ask the question in YouTube. Um, Aaron is on with us tonight, and he's going to be able to talk about doing live video production in the cloud. And if you have questions about that, this is a great time and a great opportunity to ask him questions. So if you are a house of worship or you're a spoken word artist, musician, someone who might need to be able to do live events, this is a great time to ask your questions of Aaron. So, and now we're going to go back to the questions, and we're really going to get into the streaming part of how Conversation with Tony Mobley is done. And so we're going to start with the first question is, how many people do you need to run the back end of Conversation with Tony Mobley?
Well, for this show right now, we have two. There's Taylor, who's running the visuals that you're watching, and there's Laura, who's making sure all the questions come out and making sure the audience is taken care of and that their questions get put into the system properly. So, and then, before the show, everybody kind of gets together and talks about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. We've had 4 people running the show before as well. Somebody actually telling people what visuals to put on the screen, called the technical director or the director. And the technical director actually pushes the buttons. And then a producer that manages the question stuff, and then someone else to manage the audience side of things. So it's a really scalable thing. We can do it with as few or as many people as we want to. And I mean, that's sort of the spirit of office hours. And this obviously grew out of all of that. So, getting people interested in doing this kind of work and learning how to do it, and being a platform to learn just as much as make a show is really what the back end of Tony Mobley, Conversation with Tony Mobley, is all about.
So thank you for sharing that, Aaron. And so I'm curious, would you rather have 4 or 5 people, or would you rather have 4 or 5 people and 2 of them be in training? What do you think would be the best flow? What would be the ideal situation, I guess, for training and moving forward?
I mean, it's always good to train by doing. I mean, that's how I've learned everything in my life, right? It's like, go figure it out by doing something. So I definitely think that would be ideal, if you had a cadre of folks who wanted to do all this stuff and then kind of work through the way, through all the way to, being director or whatever. There's no hierarchy really. It's everybody's kind of equal, which is good. It's very sort of meritocracy kind of. We're all doing this because we enjoy it and we love you and we want all of this to succeed. And so, that's why we're here. So if you want to come hang out and play with video stuff and do a really cool production, come on down,
Thank you, Aaron. I love you too. Is this, would you consider this a cloud production?
Oh yeah, for sure. We don't. So normally the way that a lot of shows work in the world is that there's a like a production center or a studio that sort of all of the things come back into, and then there's a crew at that studio that makes sure things are working, and switches the visuals and the audio and everything. What we've done is we've taken that studio and put it up in Amazon Web Services. So if you don't know, Amazon not only sells you toilet paper, they sell you computers that you can rent by the hour. And so we we turn on a computer that has some software on it called vMix, and that lives in the cloud, and that generates all the stuff you're looking at right now and the things you're hearing. And we use Zoom, which I'm sure most people are familiar with, to bring everybody together. So I'm dialed into a Zoom meeting, so are you. And then through the magic of technology, that Zoom stuff goes into the vMix stuff, and you can make pretty graphics and do fancy zooms and all sorts of stuff. So, and that's all in the cloud. We don't have any, hardware that's specific to what we're doing. It's all software-based stuff. We have hardware that's cameras and microphones and whatnot, but those are the same thing that you could use for a Zoom call. They're just sort of nicer versions of what you could use for a Zoom call, at work or whatever. So we, it comes out looking like a really nice broadcast quality production with a lot less cost, but also a lot less sort of hassle of running different pieces of equipment and things like that.
Yeah, I'm sort of glad that you shared that last bit about the lower cost and the barrier for entry not being so high in terms of the technology that most people have in place. And so part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation tonight is I wanted to share with houses of worship and spoken word artists. And I've reached out on Facebook and LinkedIn today to say, hey, if you are a spoken word artist, a musician, someone who is in need of being able to share your gifts, your message, whatever it is that you would like to do, and you want to make it a live event, there are a variety of different software packages that will allow you to do that. I'm very happy with the fact that we are doing this, and this is a quality production. At least I think so. And I think that most people who have had an opportunity to watch the 60 plus episodes of Conversation with Tony Mobley would agree with me that this is something that you ought to consider. So again, I'm reaching out to those houses of worship, musicians and artists, people who need to share their message or gifts as a live event. You want to ask your questions of Aaron tonight. This is a great opportunity for you. And you might be able to figure out how you can do, I work with a church that does streaming only, but there are some churches that could utilize some of this to have hybrid in person as well as virtual. And so there are a lot of different philosophies and thought processes about the fact of what is more effective over one over the other. But I would say, give it a shot, try. Don't minimize this opportunity to be able to be in one place and share your message or your gift all over the world. We have had guests for Conversation with Tony Mobley from all over the world. And so we're going to get back to Aaron and the technology of how this is. But I really want to reach out to people to understand the magnitude of how you can do something that is very professional. We got our lower thirds and we got very good graphics, and there's just some amazing things happening. So we're going to get back to it. So please ask your questions.
Yeah. And to that point, we're broadcasting this on the internet, right? There's no geography here, right? Beyond, whatever content somebody decided to block in some country, but we're not limited to, people in the US watching this just because we're in the US, right? And we're not even limited to guests in the US, right? We've had guests from all over the place, from Australia,
Absolutely.
from South Africa, to wherever. And, that is a huge thing, I think, for anybody that has, big messages to share, that, bringing the world together in a community of people online is super useful and super meaningful to people, even if they can't, shake hands or hug each other, right? I mean, the barriers go down pretty quickly, I think, when you create a community of folks. And part of that is showing, stuff online like this in a very kind of high polish way, but also, things like after hours on office hours where people just hang out, right? And they can talk and they can get to know each other and become friends. And, then, as my Facebook shows, everybody is working together now and visiting each other and, meeting each other all over the place. And it's beautiful, right? So,
Right.
these people that I think are great people, and they're all hanging out together now. And it's, and I've done it myself. I went up to New York and hung out with people from office hours because it was a community that formed online, right? But it means way more than that. And I think that's a sort of transferable thing, right? To folks in any community, right? That they want to be a part of, that, we can do this together separately in a weird way, right? I've
Yeah.
never physically met you, but I feel like I know you, right? I do know you. And, we
I know
know we
you
can
too.
call each other if we need something, and we do, right? And those kind of deep relationships are totally possible. And so I think, it's beyond just the technology of it. The technology is great, and it's an enabling piece of all of this, right? If we didn't have this technology, it wouldn't look like it does. It wouldn't work like it does. But it transcends that eventually, right? And I think that's where, like, houses of worship and, communities of interest and, people doing spoken word or writing camps or whatever could get together and make something really meaningful. But there's a lot of intention that goes into that too. You can't just say, I'm going to do this. You have to, like, do it constantly and work through it. And, we're 60 episodes in here, right? We've got, or however many we are now, we've got, and I've been a part of a lot of them, right?
Yeah, as you say that, can you talk a little bit more about? And we're going to get to Lou Perez's question in just a minute. Can you talk a little bit more about the transition from different platforms that we've gone through in terms of Conversation with Tony Mobley?
Well, I mean, when you first started, you were just doing a Zoom webinar, and
That's
you had
correct.
a bunch of
Mhm.
folks come in, and you had a panel, and it was very similar to what Office Hours was doing at the time, where you had a panel and you would stream that to YouTube, and then people would raise their hands and ask questions. And, um, that worked for a while. But I think that the real sort of magic came when everyone was like, Tony, you just need to be interviewing people because you ask really good questions and you engage people in a certain way, and it's really compelling. And, and then you just ran with it, right? And so we started out with that, and then uh, Jonas Dotel from Office Hours and Chirag Cheetah set up um, vMix for the first time, and sort of did this super high end thing with 4K production and a bunch of stuff. And this is sort of a little bit simpler version of what they used, right? And
Hmm.
so, it's evolved over time because the technology is not easy necessarily, right? You have to learn a lot of things to make it work. Um, and I happened to come in knowing a lot of this stuff already, right? So I didn't know vMix very well, but I knew how the cloud worked, and I knew how networking worked, and I knew how to Zoom worked and whatever. Um, so I came in with a base of knowledge that was augmented by the rest of the community that knew other things that I didn't know. Um, Still is, right? Occasionally I'll have a question and I'll go to Chirag or I'll go to Jonas and say, hey, how do I get this thing to do what I want to do? Or can you help me with this because I don't have time or whatever? Um, so, I think we've evolved as a production just as much as, the community around us has evolved. And as your show has evolved and the needs of the show have evolved, and now we're doing 2 streams at once, right? We're doing, LinkedIn and YouTube, right? Which was turned out to be a fairly easy thing to do, right? From our technical perspective.
Absolutely.
But it has huge impacts, right?
So yeah, it's amazing to, this is the second week of LinkedIn Live being a part of Conversations with Tony Mobley broadcast. So yeah, I just want to share one last thing about it's important for our audience to understand that regardless to your faith, look at this as an opportunity to go and share whatever faith you have without walls. Whatever your faith is, regardless, I'm not promoting any particular faith. I'm just saying, regardless to what your faith might be, this is an opportunity for you to share your message without walls. And I'm going to stop there. And so we're going to go to Lou Perez's question. Aaron, we have gotten a taste of your amazing skills while getting to see the back end during office hours for shows like this. Who would influence you the most in building these skills?
That's it. Who influenced me the most? This goes a little far back, but it's really interesting because I became interested in video production and stuff back in, like I said, high school. Well, really middle school, but high school was the first place where I found somebody that would let me do it. And we had a TV studio at my school, and it was run by a guy named Curry Leslie, who's an amazing teacher, one of the best teachers I ever had, who taught me more about life than anything. But he, I was a freshman, I think, freshman, and I worked into the TV studio, and things were kind of half working, and he didn't know what to do. And I had never been in a TV studio really, but I'm like, I'll figure it out. And I yanked all the wires out of I rewired the whole TV studio, right? With all this, it was all equipment at the time, right? This was in the late 80s. We had, we didn't have computers doing this stuff at the time. It was all real wires and hardware and stuff. And I just figured it out. And then he let me do it. That for me it taught me so much about myself, like how I learn, right? I learned by just teaching myself things. But it also taught me how to teach in a certain way too. Like, and it helps, my son, for instance, who's 14, how to teach him things. It's like, okay, give him the tools to do something and he'll show up and he'll do them because he wants to learn it, right? So he's learned how to make music, right? Because I got him tools to make music. So, electronic music. That's sort of how I mentor people at work and stuff too. How I work with my own team who, I manage, right? I don't really manage. I just sort of, here's some stuff, go do it. I'll help you, right? And so I think Curry Leslie really is probably the one who influenced me the most in that sort of way of building skills and way of understanding the world and how people work. Not everybody learns that way. Some people need a book or whatever, but everybody does learn that way to some degree or another, right? And so, that was really, really influential to me. Thanks, Lou. That was a really good question.
Thank you, Lou. And thank you, Curry Leslie, for giving Aaron that opportunity. We appreciate it. The next question is, We kind of went over this already, but I'm going to ask it again. How might a house of worship or small business use this technology?
I think a lot of people are using this technology, at least in some way, shape, or form. I think they're the real, I guess, part of that is finding people who are really interested in committing to it and to understanding how it works, right? And to, building a community around it, around the practice of it, right? So if you're a spiritual community, right, it becomes a spiritual practice to do this, right? It's not just, hey, I'm doing buttons and stuff, but it adds meaning to your life in some way, right? As opposed to just making pretty pictures. So, I mean, I think that's pretty key. And I think that's key to, businesses doing it too, right? It's the people that want to do it will make it happen. And in terms of, people will watch it if it looks good and if it sounds good and if they can understand it. And I think that, some big, mega churches and stuff, they understand that pretty implicitly because they have really high-end productions that they, have staffs doing and stuff like that. But
why is it important for it to look good and sound good?
People will engage with it better and for longer. I don't know why exactly. You can have something kind of crappy that if the message is really good, it doesn't matter so much. But over time, having something that has a little bit of polish, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, CNN or the Oprah show or anything like that. But have a little bit of polish really does sort of make people more comfortable. It makes them, especially, if there's older people involved too, right? There's a familiarity with that kind of thing. And it's less intimidating to watch, if you're watching something where everybody's blurry and they're way back here on the microphone and stuff like that, you're not going to get the same engagement from the audience, right? They're just not going to tune in the same way. So it's really important, I think, to have some quality. You don't have to go overboard. You don't have to have, 24K cameras and blah, blah, blah lights and whatever. But, spend a little bit of money on a good webcam and a good microphone, and you're like, and a little light, and you'll be okay. So.
Yeah, I kind of wrestle with it from this standpoint. I think it's important for people to understand that regardless to what your message is, we are visual creatures, and we want to see you well. More importantly, we want to hear you well. And that makes a difference in terms of how you appear. You make that first impression, and it goes a long way to people tuning in to hearing what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, even a $20 USB microphone can help you. You don't have to spend a huge amount of money, right? You can spend whatever you want. Like literally, it will take every dollar out of your bank account if you want it to. But,
right.
I've got $3,000 worth of equipment sitting around me, right? But, that was my choice and my, ridiculous habit of buying equipment. But over years,
you said in the very beginning, you're a geek. And I'm like, in there too. This is all
toys to me.
Yeah, I love it. But what I want people to understand is, as much as I love the technology and all the toys, what you shared in the very beginning was that you can do this and you don't have to break the bank to do it, and it can be quality. And so that's what we're really trying to get people to understand tonight, that you can do this and you don't have to spend all of your money to be able to do a quality professional job. And, I don't have the high-end 6K cameras and all of that. I'm using an iPhone as my primary camera.
This thing right here This is your biggest enabler right here. If you have an iPhone, use this camera. This back, I'm blocking my own light, but use this camera, not this camera, and get a little microphone that you can plug into the bottom of it, and you know you'll be good, right? Like, really good. My kid is taking a video class at school, and he's like, well, the camera doesn't do this. And I'm like, use your phone. If you want to shoot something, the audio isn't as great on the built-in mic, but it works fine for video. It looks really good, so go for it. You can buy an app for $10 that makes your iPhone camera like a cinema camera.
Yeah, I'm using Filmic Pro tonight. I've invested in possibly using the Shoot app very soon.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to make the transition from Filmic Pro to Shoot. And I am extremely happy with both of the applications, and I'm looking forward to continuing to use my iPhone as my primary camera,
Yeah.
And
it's a great camera.
Yep. And it's not even a newer iPhone. It's an older, it's the XS Max that I'm using.
Yeah, but you can buy a used camera for, a used iPhone for a couple $100. And you don't have to use it as a phone if you don't want to, but it works great as a phone too. So
yeah. And so
it's a camera that happens to have a phone in it,
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Aaron, for sharing that. We have a question from Josh Kaufman of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How did you get into enabling journalists with the work that you do? What or who was your inspiration?
So I've always been interested in journalism. I took some journalism classes in college. I was almost a communications major. I never graduated college, but journalism has been a key kind of, like I said earlier, everything is for me is about communication and understanding how we communicate with one another, how to make it better. And that automatically leads you to journalism no matter what. Like, eventually you'll get there, right? And I've done lots of work with, I set up I did a communications network after Hurricane Katrina in South Mississippi that connected a bunch of people and stuff. But this sort of later part of my life, I guess, the last 20 years, probably 10 or 15 years, really, we worked on a project during the Arab Spring called Speak to Tweet. And what it was so the internet was blocked in Egypt, but the phone network wasn't. So we set up phone numbers all over the place to let people dial in and leave voicemails. And then we had people transcribing the voicemails and translating them from Arabic or French or whatever they called in at. Like, the people in Egypt would call in and leave these voicemails, and then we would translate them and put them out on Twitter. And we also had a blog where we kept them as well. And then journalists picked those up as part of their stories, right? Because they're getting eyewitness accounts from the front, and that re-engaged the meaning of what we were doing, and in 2010, I helped start a nonprofit called Safecast, which is based in Tokyo after the earthquake there. And we did a bunch of data gathering basically ended up being for journalists, for radiation monitoring and things like that. So we did a lot of data journalism work there. And so it's always been something I've been interested in. And then, the CEO of my company, Ed Bice, who is probably who you want to get on, actually, Tony, is a really good friend of mine, and I've known him for a long, long time. And he's got a lot of the same passion that I have in terms of that that need to get people communicating more freely and better across the world. And so, when I kind of did a lot of work with software companies and doing sales and stuff. And when I was kind of done with that, I was like, Ed, I need a job. Can I do this? And he's like, yeah, it just sort of worked out. And so that's how I got to be where I am now, almost 3 years ago. And 3 years ago in November. So,
Wow.
Ed has been a really big inspiration for me in that, and as well as Curry Leslie from high school, who taught me journalism to begin with. So, that's where I'm at.
Josh, thank you.
Josh.
Thank you so much for the great question. Taylor House, ask a question. What fancy graphics would you use to live stream a birthday party? It's Laura Thompson's birthday.
Happy birthday, Laura. I didn't
Happy
realize it was
birthday,
your
Laura.
birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Lots of
We're not going to
streamers.
sing. We're not going to sing.
Yeah. Happy birthday. Lots of streamers. Beautiful.
All right. And Josh is back with another question. Aaron, can you talk about your interest and involvement in the modern aerospace scene? What, in your experience, do most space geeks have in common?
Space geeks all really love the idea of seeing the world in a different way. I think that's a universal thing, right? It's called the overview effect, right? When you go to space and you see the world as a whole, right? Because you don't ever get that perspective unless you're a space geek, and then you feel like you could have that, but you haven't had it, right? you want it, right? I've been involved in aerospace for a few years. I did a startup called Hetty and Thiel with my friend Roger, and we were working on doing a sort of solar system wide internet project where we had satellites going to different places in the world in the solar system, and we never launched, but this was the plan, and we could connect things around the solar system for like deep space, to replace the deep space network, which is a bunch of really huge dishes in 3 or 4 places in the Earth. And then, recently I've been, I had been doing video editing for NASA Spaceflight, which is a YouTube channel that is cataloging all this stuff that all these new space companies are doing. And so I was doing video editing for them for a while. I haven't done it in a while. I got really busy with work and kind of ran out of time and had some health problems and stuff. So, but I mean, I'm still very involved with that community of people, but not doing any active work anymore.
Thank you, Aaron. That's very cool.
It's cool.
I love
fun.
space too, but I'm just such a science fiction fan that I just, I love it all.
Yeah, me too.
And the next question is, please discuss your current process for training people to work with Conversation with Tony Mobley.
I'm bad at that. Training is not my forte lately. I wrote a document that shows how everything's put together and what to do. And you should ask Taylor Sunderhouse about this, probably more than me, because he's the last person I trained, and I threw him into the fire completely. So, and he is a gracious human being who took it and ran and has been running it. I haven't been around for 4 weeks, I guess, and he's been running it the whole time, and he's been doing a lot before that too. So I don't really have a process.
And he has a question for you.
Oh, really?
He says, can you talk about the use of the Stream Deck and how that is used in Conversation with Tony Mobley?
Let me show what a Stream Deck is. I happen to have one right here. So this is a Stream Deck. Not to get in my own light again. It's a little pad that this one's not plugged in, but it has, buttons, and the buttons are a screen. So you can put whatever you want on the buttons. And it just plugs into your computer with USB or whatever. And we use a program called Companion that runs in the cloud. And then we can connect to it from our local computers. And then all the buttons that make things go on the screen to vMix are available to you in your house. And so you can literally, plug this thing in and run a little program and, off you go. And so all the buttons that you push to change the cameras and put up the graphics and change the audio and all that are all on that Stream Deck. So it makes it pretty easy from a training perspective. I just made a document, like I said, that lists all the buttons and how they all work and what they do. Chirig, Cheetah, and Jonas Vittel are both sort of started that whole set of processes, and then I sort of customized it over time as the show evolved. So, yeah.
So can you talk more about the other tools that you use with the Stream Deck, like Companion, and what other tools are there?
Well, so it's made by a company called Elgato, and they have 3 different sizes. They have a little one, a big one, and a medium-sized one. That was a medium one. I have a big one too. And it comes with software. Huh?
I'm using one too.
There you go. It comes with software of its own that works for it's sort of good for automating your computer and certain other applications on your computer. So, like changing your desktop or, it'll work with other Elgato lights and stuff. So it'll turn lights on and off, and it'll change colors and whatever. It'll turn your mic on and off, that kind of thing. Companion is really used for more sort of advanced work where you need a button that does 5 different things in a certain order in a certain time. So when you push the button that says go to start the show, it does like 5 or 6 different things to make sure the show goes, right? It changes what we see in the back end, and it also changes what this audience is seeing. So all these things get changed around automatically.
So you're using the Stream Deck to program one button to do a lot of different functions because you've programmed it that way.
That's right. And that allows us to have consistency, right? So, and it makes running the show really easy because I have a button and I just hit the button and it starts the show, or I have a button and it changes to you, or it makes this 2 box that we're in right now, or adds the titles or turns them off and on, or whatever.
and so our lower thirds radio audience, our lower thirds are flashing.
That's right.
Our radio audience, our lower thirds are flashing as Aaron and I are talking. It's flashing Tony Mobley and Aaron Huslage. And so we don't want to leave you out, so you can't see it, but we want you to know what's going on.
And it also lets us handle bigger shows. So we've had shows with 7 or 8 or 9 people.
That's correct. Yes,
and
we have.
If we had to go click a button on a screen every time and we had to do something with that many people, it'd be a nightmare. So we need real buttons to go push to make this stuff work.
So that is a hardware piece that you would encourage those people who are houses of worship or small business to purchase.
That's a good point.
It would be in their best interest to purchase a Stream Deck. And so you heard it here. If you're serious about this, one of the things that we're going to encourage you to do is to go ahead and get a Stream Deck. And we have a question from Mike Andrews of Brooklyn, New York.
Edwards.
Any goals for the future passion projects?
Oh gosh. have no idea.
And thank you, Michael.
I'm largely doing my passion projects right now. Uh, I would love to do a project with um, local television news to make it better. There's a lot of journalist stuff going on right now in print and online stuff, but they're not doing a lot of video work. And I would like to see more of that because local news has largely turned into sports and crime and weather. And I would like to see more than that. And less sort of broadcasting kind of stuff. So that might be something I'd be interested in doing at some point. And I've worked on my passion projects all through my life, so I don't really let my passions get in the way of doing the things I want to do. I jump fairly, much to some people in my life's chagrin. I jump and I go and do them because they'll just eat me inside. I get really passionate, really deep, really fast. So.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for allowing Conversation with Tony Mobley to be one of your passion projects. And I say that because I know that you have done a lot for me personally and a lot for Conversations with Tony Mobley in order to get me in this space. And so I want to say thank you so much for that. And I want to thank Michael for that question. And I know he is managing or working with a house of worship in New York, and Seven Scroll is in the house tonight. So thank you, Michael, so much for being here. Josh is back with another question. And he says, Aaron, after watching all of the Conversations episodes, do you have any favorite comments by guests? What are the vital elements of engaging public conversation?
So one of the problems with working on a show is that you don't actually consume the show in the same way. Everything is very fleeting when you're working on a show. So you're thinking about other things, and you hear things, and you hear things and you listen to things, but they come in and leave. And which is why, like, after most shows, we sit down and we look and we talk about the thing, talk about the show right away, because otherwise you won't remember it, And I'm sure Tony's had this himself. Like, you're just a part of it. You're not of it in the same way that a viewer is. So it's hard for me to say.
There are times when I say, "Did I say that?
Yeah,
I don't remember saying that."
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I didn't mean to say that.
Exactly.
Or it's that does happen. And so one of the things I do try to watch it fairly recent after it airs, to try to work so that we get better for the next week. So that's one of my things that I have to work on. I'm never satisfied, which I think is a good thing. So
it's fine.
Keep working, keep pushing.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of vital elements of engaging, oh man. I mean, I think, asking for engagement never hurts, right? And Tony's really good about that, Originally he wasn't. And then we were like, you need to ask more often. Or we would get in his ear during the show and say, hey, you need to tell him to ask more questions. I think being really responsive to your audience overall is super important, right? This interaction between me and you, Josh, right now is not just right now, right? Like, we have a relationship outside of this where we're friends and we talk to each other once in a while, right? Or we're in office hours or whatever. But even if I didn't know you, like, that's the opportunity to create a relationship of some sort, right? You're not, and if you don't take that opportunity to engage, right? If you just keep this fourth wall with this piece of glass in front of me as the barrier and the boundary between you and the audience, then you're not really engaging, right? You're just talking to people. And I think, you have to really think deeply about how that works for you, right? That's just not a universal thing, right? This works differently for everybody, right? Because they have different needs and they have different wants and whatever, right? So the way I do things is different than the way Tony would do things, right? But fundamentally, it's about having a relationship beyond the piece of glass in front of the camera. In this case, or in front of them, or the piece of foam in front of my microphone, whatever, right? So, I think that's really key is being responsive.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Josh, for such great questions. Taylor Thunderhouse asked a question of you, Aaron. He says, do you want to be a DJ on Z98?
You're on Cincinnati Z98. There we go. I'm now a DJ.
All right. Thank you, Taylor, for that question.
Thank you, Taylor, for the job offer.
What's next for Conversation with Tony Mobley?
I can't answer that question. I'm not the. Well, this is your show, my friend.
you can talk about. You can talk about what infrastructure you have in mind for Conversation with Tony Mobley. How about that?
I mean, I think we could stay on this forever, right? If we wanted to, right? We're really, it's pretty baked at this point. We've tried a bunch of things. We tried, vMix Call. We tried Video Ninja. We tried a bunch of things on the back end that kind of worked, but they were kind of flaky and kind of difficult. And what we've come down to is we have a system where we could turn on 2 virtual machines on Amazon and be up and running in 20 minutes, right? And with the help of, a bunch of other people, we've made that work, right? And, there are a lot of other options out there, right? This stuff's evolving constantly, and we could always be open to experimentation, trying out new ideas, new graphics formats, new whatever, right? We can always do that stuff. And I would love to see us do more of that. If somebody wants to come and make a new graphics package for Conversations with Tony Mobley, that's fine, right? Like, let's go do that. Or, wants to write some music, that would be great too, because I'm really tired of the music we're using. And, I've listened to it more than most people, so I'm probably an aberration in that. But I would love to see somebody write some new music for us.
So how might we get new music? What's the process for those who are listening? So we're using music. It was, I think, originally put in place by Jonas.
Yeah, he licensed it from, I think, Epidemic Sound or somewhere.
Okay, and so we would contact Epidemic about.
Well, I would love to have somebody write some original music for it, not just
for Conversation with Tony Mobley, original music.
Yeah, I would love that.
That would be cool. Yeah, that would be cool.
And just reach out to Tony and say, "Hey, I got a song for you, and let's hear it."
That would be amazing. We have a question, and I guess this is the final question for tonight. And I mean final question for tonight, but not the final question. The final question for tonight is, you're speaking to the world. What do you want them to know?
I was thinking about this one last night, because this is the perennial question, isn't it? I think that you can do amazing things with small teams and small amounts of money. And you're never, the constraints that you see in your life, in your world, around these things don't always add up to, I can't do that, right? The constraints are just constraints and you work within them, right? I don't have any money. I'll do it this way because I have my iPhone and I have an internet connection and I have free tools or whatever, right? Like you can always find someone that will want to do something with you. So if you're a house of worship or a independent production of some sort that's happens to be doing an interview show on the internet, right? Like all of these things can be done and people will show up and they will help you, right? And they will give you equipment and they will donate their time and they will believe in what you're doing because you're who you are. And I think that what we built with this show shows that, right? It's a demonstration of all of those things I just talked about, right? And I think, that's what you wanted to convey in this show is that this can be done and it's available to anybody to do it, So that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Aaron, so much for being with me today. I really appreciate you being here. And okay, well, let's what's Douglas' question? Douglas popped in a question. How would you compare Conversation with Tony Mobley backend to Office Hours 2.0? Now, I'm going to say right now, Aaron, I've had the opportunity to do training with Office Hours 2.0. So believe it or not, I've been learning how to be a question manager, and hopefully at some point I'll get finished with my training and also be a TD for Office Hours 2.0. Nice. So that's something that I want to do. But I wanted to say that, Douglas, we cannot answer this question because it's too complicated to answer at this time, because I have to explain what 2.0 is, what Office Hours
I don't think you do. I think you can just say they're extremely different.
They're extremely different.
And it's not a good versus bad thing. It's just different approaches and different needs, right? Office Hours 2.0 has 16 to 20 people on it sometimes. We have 2 most of the time. The needs are vastly different. And so the solution is vastly different. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing good or bad about it. It's just different. And I think that, we both have pros and cons, and, that's it.
I would just add that this is a way in which to do a quality production at a minimum cost. There is a cost, but it's a minimum.
We spend about $100 a month on our cloud. If I pay for it, so it'd be about $100 a month for everything, for the cloud infrastructure, which is not a lot of money, but it's not cheap either, right?
Right. And Office Hours 2.0 is a high-end video production. It's the best of the best in terms of the hardware and software, and the amount of, as Aaron said, the amount of people that are involved in order to make it work. There are a lot of moving parts. It is something that could eventually, I think, replace a major network because of the way it is being done and all the bells and whistles that it has. And so, high-end cameras and just the best hardware and software is involved. And it is really an amazing thing to see. And we have 2 questions from Mickey Macachura from the Philippines. He's asking a question of us tonight. And his question is, jumping in late here, Aaron, so nice to see you. Thank you for all of that and what you do for the community and all that you do for
Meedan.
Meedan. Thank you for being such a cool-headed mentor to us. So it's really a thank you as opposed to a question. So thank you, Mickey, for that.
Mickey.
And his last question is, can you talk about Meedan, what Meedan does, and how you're involved?
I would say rewind to the beginning of the show because I talked about that. I'm happy to talk to you about it more if you want to talk about it more.
We're actually we will have another conversation about it. Absolutely,
yeah,
we will. So
I'm not trying to blow you off, Mickey. We just talked about it earlier. So
thank you, Mickey, for your great questions. We appreciate it. And I'm just going to go to my thanks now. First, we want to thank Kimberly Mobley, Ron Mobley, Global Family and Friends, Alex Lindsay, Office Hour members, DVE Store, Lemon Entertainment Technologies, Byte Hive, Video360.com, ApproveForLoan.com, Cloud Bedrock LLC, Ken Jordan, Jonas Tatel, Aaron Huslage, Cherrick Cheetah, David Brady, Mark C. Folk, Richard Lavery, Chris Fenwick, Manolo Lozano, Jeffrey Powers, Bocordo, Mickey McAchura, House Gajar, Doug Moeller, Laura Thompson, Brian Chan, Dennis Champion Walker, Roscoe Jones, George Butters, Joshua Minden, Daniel Maxwell, Taylor Sunderhouse, Adrian Allbeck, Michael Marv, Zachary Sorensen, and Conversation with Tony Mobley producer, Klyluk, Miguel, Lopez, Waterman. Thank you all so much. And I'm going to say at the end of this show, one of the things that we are going to do in the future is that we're going to move away from me reading all the names and there's going to be a scroll. And so we are so thankful, but that's coming soon. Conversation with Tony Mobley can now be heard again on 98.1fm.com. Our radio audience in Cincinnati, Ohio. Thank you, Taylor Sunderhouse and the team behind Conversation with Tony Mobley for making this all happen. Thank you, Aaron Huslage, so much. Next week,
of course,
Miss Valerie Olenek, educator, educational trainer, and business person. You want to tune in. Important conversation. So we'll see you next week. And I'm going to say good night, everyone. Take care. Goodbye, YouTube. Take care, LinkedIn. And goodbye, everybody. Take care. Good night. Thank you again, Aaron. Appreciate it.